I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked into that Blockbuster. The fluorescent lights hummed too loud. That electric buzz that gets under your skin when you're already on edge. The carpet had that sticky feel you get in old movie theaters, and the whole place smelled like artificial butter and desperation. But hell, I was desperate too. 3 months since I'd dropped out of state, 2 months since my last paycheck from the campus bookstore, and about $15 left in my checking account. When you're that broke, you don't ask questions about why a video store needs someone to work midnight to 8 a.m. Judith Martin looked exactly like what you'd expect from a Blockbuster manager. Tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, auburn hair cut in that practical bob that screams, "I gave up on caring about my appearance somewhere around 1995. She wore a navy polo with the Blockbuster logo embroidered on the chest, khakis that had seen better days, and the expression of someone who'd been dealing with late fees and rewinding complaints for way too long. "You're Preston?" She glanced at the application in her hand, then back at me. "College dropout?" "Yeah." I shifted my weight, trying not to look as desperate as I felt. "But I'm reliable. I need this job." She nodded like she'd heard that before. Night shifts different from days, quieter mostly. Different clientele. The way she said different made something twist in my stomach, but I ignored it. I needed the money. I can handle quiet. That's when she reached under the counter and pulled out this laminated card. The plastic was yellowed around the edges, like it had been sitting in a drawer for years, and there were coffee stains on one corner. She slid it across the counter toward me. 7 rules for the overnight shift, she said. Her voice had gone flat, professional. Previous employees. Well, let's just say adherence to these guidelines is non-negotiable. I picked up the card. The rules were printed in that generic Times New Roman font you see on workplace safety posters, but someone had used a thick black marker to write "important" across the top in all caps. My eyes scanned down the list, and with each line, I felt that twist in my stomach get tighter. Rule 1. Never rewind any VHS tape found outside its case after 2 a.m. Place it directly in the return bin without viewing the label. Rule 2. Customers who browse the horror section while wearing clothing from previous decades should be ignored completely. Do not acknowledge their presence. Do not offer assistance. Do not make eye contact. Rule 3. Any VHS tape with a handwritten label must be immediately returned to the night drop box. Do not watch it. Do not read the label aloud. Do not ask questions about its contents. I stopped reading and looked up at Judith. She was watching me with those sharp green eyes, waiting for my reaction. "This is—" I started, then caught myself. I needed this job. "These are the actual rules?" "Dead serious." She leaned forward, lowering her voice even though we were the only ones in the store. "Preston, I'm going to be straight with you because I like you, and because we've had 3 people quit this position in the last 2 months. No notice, no explanation. They just stopped showing up. 3 people. In 2 months. That should have been a red flag the size of Oklahoma, but my brain was too focused on the fact that she'd said she liked me. When you're 20 years old and your life's falling apart, you cling to whatever positive feedback you can get. What happened to them? Judith's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her glasses. I honestly don't know, but I know they all started ignoring the rules. I looked back down at the card. There were 4 more rules below the first 3, each one stranger than the last. Something about not staying in the back office after 3 a.m., never accepting returns of movies that don't exist in the computer system, and this one made my skin crawl. If someone asks for a movie called The Last Showing, tell them it's been discontinued and immediately lock the front door. "Judith," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "these sound like something out of a horror movie, like the kind of thing someone made up to mess with the new guy." She didn't smile, didn't even crack a grin. That's what got to me more than the rules themselves, the complete absence of humor in her face. This wasn't a prank. She wasn't going to laugh and tell me the real rules were just don't steal and be nice to customers. I know how it sounds, she said. Trust me, I know. But Preston, I've been managing this location for 8 years. I've seen things. She trailed off, shaking her head. Just follow the rules, all 7 of them. Don't get curious. Don't think you know better. And don't try to be a hero. Don't try to be a hero. That stuck with me. What kind of video store job required not being heroic? But here's the thing about being broke at 20. You make compromises with reality. You tell yourself that weird doesn't matter if it pays $8.50 an hour. You convince yourself that 3 previous employees probably quit for normal reasons, like finding better jobs or moving away. You ignore the voice in your head that's screaming about red flags and bad decisions. I needed this job, not wanted, needed. My parents had cut me off when I dropped out, my credit cards were maxed, and my roommate was already talking about finding someone who could actually pay rent. $8.50 an hour, 40 hours a week, meant I could keep my head above water for another month. Maybe 2 if I lived on ramen and stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely essential. When do I start? I asked. Judith nodded, and for just a second I thought I saw something that might have been relief in her expression. Or maybe it was just the fluorescent lights playing tricks. Tonight, she said. I'll stay until midnight to show you the basics. Then you're on your own until morning shift comes in at 8. I folded the laminated card and slipped it into my pocket, feeling the plastic crinkle against my fingers. 7 rules. How hard could it be to follow 7 simple rules? Looking back now, I realized that was probably the exact same thought the 3 previous employees had. But at the time, standing in that buzzing, butter-scented tomb of the entertainment industry, I was just grateful to have a job that would let me eat something other than dollar menu burgers for the next few weeks. I should have walked away right then. Should have thanked Judith for her time, thrown that laminated card in the trash, and gone back to job hunting. Should have trusted my instincts instead of my empty bank account. But I didn't. I stood there in that too-bright store, surrounded by rows of movies I couldn't afford to rent, and told myself that $8.50 an hour was worth whatever weirdness came with it. The second night started quiet enough. I'd gotten through my first shift without any weirdness. Well, nothing beyond the usual late-night crowd anyway. Some guy in a stained Batman t-shirt had rented 3 different Steven Seagal movies, and this woman with purple hair extensions spent 45 minutes debating between Clueless and Reality Bites before leaving empty-handed. Normal stuff. I was feeling pretty good about myself, honestly. Maybe those rules were just Judith's way of weeding out the flaky employees. Maybe I was overthinking everything. That confidence lasted until around 1:30 in the morning. I was restocking the comedy section, trying to figure out why we had 7 copies of Biodome but only 1 airplane, when I noticed something on the returns counter that hadn't been there 10 minutes earlier. A single VHS tape, sitting right in the center like someone had placed it there deliberately. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that sickly yellowish glow that made everything look like it was underwater. I walked over, my sneakers squeaking against the sticky carpet, and picked up the tape. No official Blockbuster label. No barcode. Just a piece of masking tape slapped across the top with 2 words written in black marker, "Help me." The handwriting was shaky, desperate, like someone had been writing while their hands were trembling. The letters slanted downward, getting more frantic as they went. The E in ME was barely legible, more of a scribble than a letter. I turned the tape over in my hands. Plain black plastic, the kind you could buy at any electronics store. The kind people used to record stuff off TV or make their own home movies. There was a small crack running down one side, and the label was starting to peel at the corner. My stomach did this little flip thing. Rule number 3 flashed through my mind. Immediately return any handwritten label VHS tapes to the night drop without viewing the contents or reading labels aloud. But here's the thing about rules. Sometimes they make you want to break them just to see what happens. It's like when someone tells you not to think about pink elephants and suddenly that's all you can think about. I glanced around the store. Empty, except for me. The security camera in the corner was pointed toward the register, not the TV area. Judith wouldn't be back until tomorrow night. What could it hurt to just look? I walked over to the small TV setup we had near the kids section. It was this old 13-inch Zenith with a built-in VCR, the kind they probably had in every American living room in 1992. The screen was dusty, and there was a piece of masking tape over the channel buttons because they stuck. My hands were steady as I slid the tape into the slot. The machine made that mechanical whirring sound VCRs always made, like tiny gears grinding against each other. Then the screen flickered from blue to static, then to darkness. For a second I thought the tape was blank, just black screen with that faint electronic hum in the background. But then I caught movement, a pale shape shifting in what looked like a small, cramped space. The image quality was terrible, grainy and washed out like someone had recorded it with a cheap handheld camera in bad lighting. There was this constant static running through the picture, little white dots dancing across the screen like electronic snow, but I could make out enough to see it was a girl, teenage, maybe 16 or 17, long dark hair that looked greasy and unwashed. She was wearing what looked like a Blockbuster polo shirt, navy blue with the logo visible even through the poor video quality. She was in some kind of small room. Concrete walls, I think. Maybe 8 feet by 8 feet. No windows. A single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling cast harsh shadows across her face, and she was scared. You could see it in the way she moved, quick and jerky like a trapped animal. She kept looking over her shoulder at something off camera, then back at whoever was filming. The timestamp in the corner read 03-1597, 2:17 a.m., 1997, 6 years ago. But that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was when she started talking. Is someone there? Her voice was thin, desperate. I can hear footsteps. Someone's walking around out there. I froze, because I'd just been walking around. From the comedy section to the returns counter to the TV area. Please, she continued, pressing her hands against one of the walls. I know you can hear me. I've been trapped here for, God, I don't know how long. Days? Weeks? Time doesn't work right in here. The camera, she must have been holding it herself, shook as she moved closer to the wall. And that's when I got a really good look at where she was. The concrete blocks, the metal shelving unit in the corner, the way the ceiling sloped down on one side. It was our back office. Or something that looked exactly like it. I'd been in there earlier to grab some return stickers, same layout, same dimensions, even that weird water stain on the wall that looked like a cloud. There it was in the video, exactly the same. But our back office didn't have concrete walls. It was just drywall painted that institutional beige color, and it definitely didn't lock from the outside. I know someone's there, the girl said again, and this time she was looking directly at the camera. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot. I can hear the register, the door chime. Someone's working out there. The register hadn't made any sounds. I hadn't opened the door since my shift started. But as if on cue, the VCR remote slipped out of my hand and clattered to the floor. The sound echoed through the empty store. On screen, the girl's head snapped toward the wall. There! Did you hear that? Someone dropped something. The chill that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the store's air conditioning. I picked up the remote with shaking hands, staring at the impossible image on the screen. She was reacting to me. To sounds I was making right now, in real time. But the timestamp still read 1997. My name is Leah Harper, she said, turning back to the camera. I work here, worked here. I don't know anymore. I came in for the night shift, and something happened. I'm trapped. The door won't open. The walls. She touched the concrete, and I swear I could hear her fingernails scraping against the surface. They weren't like this before. I found myself backing away from the TV, the remote clutched in my sweaty palm. This was impossible. Videos don't work like this. They're recordings of things that already happened. They don't respond to the present. "Please don't leave me," Leah said, and now she was crying, tears streaming down her face as she pressed both hands against the wall. Everyone else left. They all just gave up, stopped coming to work. Please don't be like them. Everyone else. The 3 employees who'd quit without notice, the ones Judith had mentioned during my interview. Had they all seen this? Had they all found this same tape, broken this same rule, watched this same impossible footage? "I can help you," Leah continued. "I know things about this place, about what happens here at night, but you have to get me out. You have to—" I jabbed the eject button. The tape popped out with a mechanical click, and the screen went back to blue. The silence that followed was deafening, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic on the street outside. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the tape. The plastic felt warm, like it had been sitting in sunlight instead of inside a cold machine. I stared at the handwritten label, "Help me." Now I understood why Judith had looked so serious when she handed me those rules, why she'd specifically warned me about curiosity and thinking I knew better. The rules weren't suggestions. They weren't some corporate policy or insurance liability thing. They were protection from whatever this place really was after dark. I couldn't sleep that morning, not after what I'd seen on that tape. Leah's face kept flashing in my mind, the desperate way she'd looked at the camera, how she'd reacted to sounds I was making 26 years later. That wasn't possible. Couldn't be possible. But I'd seen it happen. Around noon, when most people were having lunch and I should have been dead asleep, I found myself walking through the glass doors of the Riverside Public Library. The place smelled like old paper and that industrial carpet cleaner they use in government buildings. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional beige that made my eyes hurt. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Just answers, I guess. Something to make sense of what I'd witnessed. The librarian at the reference desk was this older woman with reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain. She looked like someone's grandmother, the kind who'd bake cookies and ask about your grades. When I asked about old newspaper archives, she perked up like I'd just made her day. "Oh, we have everything digitized back to 1985, she said, leading me to a computer terminal that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. "What are you researching, dear?" "Missing persons case, from 1997. Her expression shifted slightly, got more serious. "Local?" "Yeah, a girl named Leah Harper." Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe. Or just the kind of look librarians get when they're accessing their mental filing system. She didn't say anything else, just showed me how to search the database and left me to it. The first article came up right away. Front page of the Riverside Herald, March 18th, 1997. The headline made my stomach drop. "Teen employee vanishes from video store." There was her picture. School photo, probably from earlier that year. She looked normal, happy even. Long blonde hair instead of the dark hair I'd seen on the tape, but the face was unmistakable. Same wide eyes, same heart-shaped face, 16 years old, junior at Riverside High, worked part-time at the Blockbuster on Pine Street, the same Blockbuster where I'd been working for exactly 2 nights. I read the article 3 times, my coffee getting cold in the plastic cup I'd bought from the vending machine. Leah Harper had been working alone during a night shift, just like me when she'd simply disappeared. Her car was still in the parking lot the next morning. Her purse was still behind the counter. The cash register hadn't been touched, but Leah was gone. The security footage showed her entering the back office at 11:43 p.m. to do inventory. The cameras had a clear view of the office door, the only way in or out. She never came back out. When the morning shift arrived at 8 a.m., they found the back office empty. Door was still locked from the inside, they said. No signs of struggle, no broken windows, no secret passages, no nothing. Just an empty room and a stack of inventory sheets with Leah's handwriting that stopped mid-sentence. I scrolled through follow-up articles, my hand shaking slightly as I clicked the mouse. The police had treated it as a potential kidnapping at first. They'd torn that back office apart, brought in cadaver dogs, even checked the ceiling tiles and floorboards. Nothing. The FBI got involved when they couldn't figure out how someone could vanish from a locked room. The case went cold within 6 months. No leads, no evidence, no explanation that made any logical sense. But that wasn't the end of the story. I found smaller articles buried in the local section over the next few years. Night employees at the Blockbuster reporting strange occurrences, knocking sounds from inside the walls, tapes appearing in the returns that weren't part of the store's inventory, employees quitting without notice. The pattern was there if you knew what to look for. 3 employees in the past 2 months, Judith had said. But it went back further than that. Way further. I printed everything I could find, feeding quarters into the library's ancient printer until I had a stack of articles thick enough to choke on. Then I drove home, spread everything out on my kitchen table, and tried to make sense of it all. That's when the real weight of it hit me. I wasn't dealing with some elaborate prank or corporate hazing ritual. This was real. Leah Harper was real. Her disappearance was real. And somehow, impossibly, she was still there. By the time my shift started that night, I'd made a decision. I was going to confront Judith about what I'd learned. No more dancing around weird rules or pretending everything was normal. I needed answers, and she was the only person who might have them. Judith was behind the counter when I walked in, updating some kind of inventory spreadsheet on the computer. She looked up when the door chimed, and I saw her expression change the moment she saw my face, like she knew exactly what was coming. "We need to talk," I said. She glanced around the empty store, then back at me. "About what?" I pulled out the stack of printouts from my backpack and set them on the counter. The headline of the top article was clearly visible. "Teen employee vanishes from video store." Judith stared at the papers for a long moment. Her face went pale, but she didn't look surprised, just tired, like she'd been waiting for this conversation for years. "Where did you—" "The library," I said. "Leah Harper, 16 years old, disappeared from this store in 1997 while working a night shift." Judith closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. "Preston, I found a tape last night, handwritten label. Rule number 3 says I should have put it straight in the night drop, but I didn't. I watched it." I leaned forward. She was on it. Leah. And she could hear me, in real time. For several seconds, Judith didn't say anything, just stood there with her eyes closed, like she was trying to figure out how much to tell me. Or maybe she was just trying to figure out how to explain something that couldn't be explained. Finally, she opened her eyes and looked at me. "How long have you known about this?" "Since last night." "But you've known longer, haven't you?" She nodded slowly. "Since I became manager. 2003. And you never said anything. Never called the police, never—" "And told them what exactly?" Judith's voice was sharper now. That a girl who disappeared 6 years earlier was somehow still alive and trapped inside VHS tapes? That she could communicate through handwritten labels and security footage? You think they would have believed me? I didn't have an answer for that, because she was right. It sounded insane. It was insane. "How is this possible?" I asked. Judith was quiet for another long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know exactly how it happened, but Leah, she's not gone. She's trapped. Somehow, when she disappeared that night, she got caught between the physical store and the magnetic recording medium of VHS tapes. The handwritten tapes you've been finding, those are her attempts to communicate with the outside world. The words hung in the air between us, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The truth hit me like cold water in the face. Judith didn't just pause there behind the counter. She kept going, her voice flat and matter-of-fact like she was explaining how to rewind a tape. The handwritten tapes aren't just recordings, Preston. She picked up one of the newspaper articles I'd printed, the one with Leah's school photo. They're doorways, connections. Every time someone watches one of those tapes, it creates a link between our world and wherever Leah is trapped. I felt my stomach drop. The warm VHS case in my hands suddenly felt like it was burning. That's why Rule 3 exists, Judith continued. Don't watch them. Don't read the labels aloud, because once you do, she gestured vaguely at the air. Once you make that connection, she can start pulling you in. The electromagnetic field, or whatever the hell it is, it gets stronger. She gets stronger. My mouth went dry. The 3 employees who quit didn't quit. Judith's voice was barely above a whisper. They got pulled in, one by one. I found their last paycheck still sitting here uncashed, their cars abandoned in the parking lot. She rubbed her temples. 26 years, Preston. Leah's been trapped for 26 years, and every person who tries to help her just joins her. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I could hear the hum of the mini-fridge by the candy rack, the distant sound of traffic on Pine Street. Normal sounds. But everything felt different now, like the air itself had changed. The rules aren't corporate policy, I said. It wasn't a question. No, they're survival instructions. By my 4th night, I thought I understood what I was dealing with. I was wrong. I came in at 11:30, same as always. Judith had the inventory sheet spread across the counter, and she barely looked up when I walked in. We'd developed this weird routine since our conversation, professional distance mixed with shared knowledge of something impossible, like we were both pretending everything was normal while knowing it absolutely wasn't. Anything I should know about? I asked, hanging my jacket on the hook behind the counter. Quiet night so far. She gathered up the papers, returned maybe a dozen movies since 8. Nothing unusual. That was our code now. Unusual. Judith left at midnight and I settled into my routine, checked the returns, restocked the new releases, straightened the horror section, carefully avoiding looking too closely at any customers who might be browsing there. The rules were burned into my brain now. Around 1:15, I was alphabetizing the comedy section when I found the first tape. It was wedged between Dumb and Dumber and The Dummy. And I almost missed it entirely. Just a regular VHS case, but when I pulled it out, my blood went cold. Masking tape label. Handwritten text in that same desperate scrawl. Please help me. I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds, my heart hammering. Then I remembered Judith's words about connections and doorways, and I practically jogged to the night drop box, shoved the tape through the slot without reading the label aloud, without even looking at it too closely. But when I turned around, there was another one sitting on the counter by the register. This one said, "I'm running out of time," in letters that got shakier toward the end, like whoever wrote it was losing control of their hand. My skin prickled. I grabbed that tape and headed for the drop box again, but stopped halfway there, because I could see a third tape sitting on top of the TV in the kids section. Even from 15 feet away, I could make out the masking tape label. I forced myself to stay calm. Follow protocol. I dropped the second tape into the slot and walked over to get the third one. The label on this one made my stomach clench. They're getting closer. By the time I'd returned that one to the drop box, I'd spotted 2 more. One balanced on the edge of a shelf in the drama section, another sitting in the middle of the floor by the horror movies, like someone had just dropped it there. The handwriting on these was different, more frantic. The letters looked like they'd been carved into the masking tape rather than written. Can't hold on much longer. They know you're here. I was practically running between the shelves and the drop box now, collecting tapes as fast as I could find them. But for every one I returned, 2 more seemed to appear. It was like playing whack-a-mole with supernatural video cassettes. The worst part, every time I picked up a tape, it was warm. Not room temperature warm, body heat warm, like someone had just been holding it. Around 2:30, I realized what was happening wasn't just random. The tapes were appearing in a pattern, leading me around the store in a specific route. Drama section to horror to comedy to new releases and back, like I was being herded. That's when I looked up at the security monitors. The black and white screens showed the usual views. 4 cameras covering the main floor, 1 for the back office, 1 for the parking lot. Everything looked normal at first glance. Empty aisles, checkout counter, the usual shadows cast by the fluorescent lighting. But then I saw her. Just for a second, in the corner of camera 2. A figure moving between the drama and horror sections. Dark hair, pale skin, Blockbuster polo shirt. I blinked, and she was gone. My hands were shaking as I leaned closer to the monitors. Camera 1 showed the front of the store. Empty. Camera 3 covered the new releases. Nothing. But camera 4. There. In the back corner, near the foreign films. The same figure, but clearer this time. Definitely a girl. Definitely wearing a Blockbuster uniform. She was looking directly at the camera, and even through the grainy black and white feed, I could see her mouth moving like she was trying to say something. I switched my attention to camera 5, the back office, empty. But when I looked back at camera 4, she was gone again. "This isn't happening," I whispered to the empty store. "This is not happening." But even as I said it, movement caught my eye on camera 1. She was there now, standing in the middle of the main aisle, the aisle I'd been walking through maybe 5 minutes earlier, collecting those damned tapes. She was looking around like she was searching for something, or someone. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. The monitors flickered, not like a power surge, more like interference. When the picture stabilized, she was on camera 2, then camera 3. Moving faster now, her figure jumping from screen to screen like she was teleporting through the store. The worst part was watching her on cameras that showed areas I'd just been in. I'd see her standing exactly where I'd been standing moments before, sometimes in the exact same pose, like she was following in my footsteps, tracing my path through the store. Around 3 a.m., the pattern changed. Instead of jumping between cameras, she started appearing on multiple screens at the same time. Camera 1 showed her standing by the checkout counter, the exact spot where I was sitting. Camera 2 had her in the horror section. Camera 3 caught her near the returns bin, all simultaneously, all looking directly into their respective cameras with that same desperate expression. I pushed back from the monitors, my chair rolling across the tile floor with a sharp squeak. But I couldn't look away. It was like watching a nightmare unfold in real time across 6 different screens. On camera 4, she was walking, stalking, down the main aisle. Her movements were jerky, unnatural, like someone learning how to use a body that didn't quite belong to them. On camera 5, she stood perfectly still in the back office, her head tilted at an angle that made my neck hurt just looking at it. But it was camera 6 that made me grab the counter again, the parking lot camera. She was out there too, standing next to my beat-up Honda Civic, just standing there, staring at the building, at me. The interference got worse. The screens flickered more frequently now, static cutting across the feeds in waves, and every time the picture cleared, she was closer. Not just closer to the cameras, closer to where I was sitting. Camera 1. She'd moved from the counter to the magazine rack, maybe 15 feet from my actual position. Camera 2. Standing at the end of the horror aisle, her pale face turned toward the front of the store. Camera 3. By the new releases, her mouth opened like she was screaming, but no sound came through the monitors. My breath was coming in short gasps. The store felt smaller now, like the walls were pressing in. Every shadow looked like movement. Every reflection in the movie cases could have been her standing behind me. Around 3:15, the cameras started showing impossible things. She appeared on camera 1, standing exactly where I was sitting, but facing the opposite direction, like she was occupying the same space as me, but in some other dimension. On camera 2, she was walking through the shelves, passing through the movie cases like they were made of air. The movements were getting more aggressive, too. Instead of that lost, searching look, her expression had changed. Focused. Determined. She moved with purpose now, checking each aisle systematically like she was hunting for something. For me. The static grew worse with each passing minute, cutting across the screens in thick black lines. But between the interference, I caught glimpses that made my skin crawl. Her running down the main aisle. Her standing directly in front of camera 1, so close her face filled the entire screen. Her hands pressed against what must have been the camera lens. Her mouth moving frantically like she was shouting something I couldn't hear. By 3:30, she was on every camera simultaneously, and the movements had become frantic, violent almost. Camera feeds showed her throwing herself against walls that didn't exist, clawing at the air, pointing directly at the cameras with an expression of pure desperation, mixed with something that looked dangerously close to rage. The interference reached a crescendo, all 6 monitors dissolving into static before flickering back to normal views of an empty store. The pieces started clicking together around 4 in the morning, while I stood there staring at those empty monitors. My brain was trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. All those cameras, all those impossible angles of the same girl moving through spaces that shouldn't connect. That's when it hit me. The equipment. I looked around the store with different eyes, really looked at it for the first time since I'd started working here. The checkout system was from the early 90s, all green text on black screens. The security monitors were these bulky CRT things that probably weighed 40 pounds each. Even the price guns we used were these ancient laser scanners that made this weird whining noise when you pulled the trigger. Everything here was analog. Everything was magnetic. VHS tapes work by storing information on magnetic tape, right? I knew that much from, hell, probably some Discovery Channel thing I watched as a kid. The tape head reads the magnetic patterns and converts them back into video signals. But what happens when you've got a whole building full of outdated electromagnetic equipment all running together? All those overlapping fields, all that residual magnetic energy building up over years. And then I thought about what Judith said, how fewer people rented tapes every year, how the technology was dying. But dying technology doesn't just disappear. All that electromagnetic energy had to go somewhere. I walked over to the horror section, running my fingers along the spines of the VHS cases. Most of them were beat up, returned hundreds of times over the years. Each time someone watched one of these tapes, they were adding a little more electromagnetic signature to the mix. And when people stopped renting them, when they moved on to DVDs and left all this analog equipment behind, Leah had been learning to swim in those leftover signals. That's what I figured out, standing there at 4:15 in the morning with my hands shaking slightly from too much coffee and not enough sleep. She'd been trapped in the electromagnetic field when she disappeared, but she wasn't just stuck. She was adapting, getting stronger as the technology around her became more obsolete, more abandoned. I remembered the warmth of those handwritten tapes, the way they felt almost alive when I touched them. Because they were alive. Or at least, part of her was. The realization made my stomach drop. Leah wasn't just sending messages through those tapes. She was recording herself onto them, copying her consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, onto blank magnetic media and somehow projecting it through any playback device connected to the store's system. That's why she could hear me in real time on that first tape. That's why she appeared on all the security cameras. The whole building was one giant electromagnetic web, and she'd learned to move through it like data through a network. I was still processing this when I remembered the customers in vintage clothing. Judith's rule number 2: ignore customers in vintage clothing browsing the horror section. But what if they weren't really customers at all? My hands went cold. Those people I'd glimpsed on previous shifts, always dressed like they stepped out of different decades, always lingering around the horror movies. They moved wrong, too smooth, too quiet, and they never bought anything, never even approached the counter. They were echoes, had to be. People Leah had managed to partially pull into her reality over the years, caught between the physical world and the magnetic dimension she existed in. Not fully trapped like her, but not fully free either. Just stuck in the static between channels. That's when the intercom crackled to life. Preston. I froze. The voice was clear, no static, coming from every speaker in the store at once. It was her. Leah. But not filtered through the grainy footage of a tape this time. This was direct, immediate. You figured it out, didn't you? Her voice echoed from the ceiling speakers, the ones that usually played that endless loop of soft rock and movie trailers. I can feel it when you understand something new. The electromagnetic field. It responds to strong emotions. Fear, curiosity, recognition. I looked up at the nearest speaker, a white plastic dome mounted above the new releases. Leah. I've been getting stronger, Preston. Every time someone abandons a VHS player, every time another video store closes down, all that residual magnetic energy has nowhere to go. It comes here, to me. My mouth was dry. How long have you been able to do this? Talk through the speakers? A few months now, since the last employee. Since Marcus. He lasted longer than the others, really tried to help me. But in the end, he couldn't handle what I was asking him to do. What were you asking him to do? The speakers went quiet for a moment. When her voice came back, it was softer, more hesitant. I found a way out, Preston. But it's not what you'd call a clean escape. I waited. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their harsh glare across the empty aisles. The smell of artificial butter from the popcorn machine seemed stronger than usual, almost nauseating. There's a storage room in the back, behind the office. Judith doesn't have the key, but I know where it is. There's equipment in there. Old equipment, from when this place was first built. A master recording device that was used to copy promotional tapes, transfer formats, that kind of thing. My heart was beating faster. What kind of equipment? The kind that can swap consciousness between the physical world and magnetic medium. But here's the catch, Preston. The exchange has to be operated from both sides. Someone has to work the controls from your world while I operate the corresponding equipment from inside the tape dimension. The words hit me like ice water. You mean? I mean someone has to take my place. Willingly. The electromagnetic prison needs a consciousness to anchor it, or the whole system collapses. I can get out, but only if someone else gets in. I stared at the speaker, my mind racing. That's why the other employees quit. That's why Marcus disappeared. She'd asked them to make the trade, and they couldn't do it. Or maybe they tried, and something went wrong. Preston, are you still there? Yeah, I whispered. I'm here. The electronics started going haywire around 4:30. I'd been standing there by the new releases, still processing everything Leah had told me about the escape method and its cost, when the fluorescent lights above the comedy section began flickering in rapid succession. Not the usual slow buzz and fade you'd expect from dying bulbs, but sharp, deliberate pulses that seemed to follow a pattern. The checkout computer's green screen started scrolling random characters, numbers and letters cascading down like digital rain. Then the phone rang. I picked up the handset, expecting dead air or maybe a late-night customer asking about return times. Instead, I heard Leah's voice coming through the receiver, but distorted now, fragmented, like she was speaking through water. "Preston, something's happening to me." The VCR near the kids section ejected a tape on its own. The laser scanner at the counter started beeping continuously, its red light sweeping back and forth across empty air. Every speaker in the store crackled with static, and underneath it, I could hear something that made my skin crawl. Breathing. Ragged, desperate breathing from a dozen different directions. I can feel myself spreading. Leah's voice came from the intercom, but now it sounded like multiple versions of her speaking at once, slightly out of sync. "The fields are amplifying. I'm getting stronger, but I'm also getting scattered." The security monitors flickered to life, showing impossible views again. But this time, instead of just seeing Leah moving through the store, I saw fragments of her everywhere. A hand reaching through the drama section. Her face reflected in the glass door of the frozen foods cooler that didn't exist in our layout. Her silhouette walking backwards through the wall between horror and foreign films. She wasn't just navigating the electromagnetic web anymore. She was becoming it. "Preston, I need you to understand something." Her voice was clearer now, coming from directly above me. I looked up at the white speaker dome, and for a split second I could swear I saw her face pressed against the inside of the plastic. "What I'm about to show you, it's not meant to hurt you, but you need to know what this place really is." The lights went out. Every single one. The fluorescents, the exit signs, even the red power indicators on the electronics. Total darkness for maybe 3 seconds. And in that blackness I felt something shift around me, like the air itself was becoming thicker, more resistant. When the lights came back, I wasn't standing in the store anymore. I was inside one of the security monitors. I don't know how to describe it properly even now. Imagine being compressed into a space the size of a coffin, but that coffin is made of static and electrical interference. The walls weren't walls. They were shifting patterns of gray and white noise that pressed against me from every direction. Above me, below me, around me. I could feel the magnetic fields pulling at my thoughts, trying to record them, store them, make them permanent. The space kept changing size. One moment I had room to move my arms. The next I was crushed so tightly I couldn't expand my chest to breathe. The boundaries weren't fixed. They responded to something I couldn't control. Maybe Leah's emotions or the fluctuations in the building's electrical system. Every few seconds, the walls would compress inward, and I'd feel like I was being pressed flat, turned into data, converted into something that could be stored on magnetic tape. But the worst part wasn't the physical compression. It was the isolation. I could see out through the monitor's screen into the store, could see my own body standing there motionless like an empty shell. But I couldn't affect anything, couldn't call out, couldn't move, couldn't make any impact on the world I'd been pulled away from. I was trapped in a space between spaces, watching life continue without me while I existed as nothing more than electromagnetic patterns. 26 years, Leah's voice whispered around me. But now I understood she wasn't speaking through speakers. She was the space itself, the static, the crushing digital walls. 26 years of this, watching people come and go through these monitors, seeing the world change while I stay trapped in a space that never stops shifting, never stops compressing. The walls squeezed tighter. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. How could it? I didn't have vocal cords anymore, didn't have lungs. I was just consciousness trapped in electromagnetic fields, watching my body stand frozen in a store that might as well have been on another planet. The other employees, Leah continued, and now I could feel her presence surrounding me, not threatening, but desperate. They saw what you're seeing now. Marcus lasted the longest. 3 weeks of me showing him glimpses, trying to make him understand. But none of them could handle it. They'd come to work the next night and quit without explanation, or they'd just stop showing up. The space expanded suddenly, giving me a moment of relief before crushing down again. I realized this was her existence. Constant uncertainty. Never knowing if the next moment would bring expansion or compression, never able to predict when the walls would close in. No wonder she was fragmenting, spreading through the building's systems. She was trying to find space, any space, where she could exist without being constantly crushed. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice even though she didn't have a physical form to cry. "But I can't stay here anymore. The magnetic fields are getting stronger as the equipment gets older, and I'm losing pieces of myself. Sometimes I forget who I was before this. Sometimes I can only remember being static and electromagnetic interference." I felt myself being pulled back, the monitor space dissolving around me like digital snow. The sensation of expansion was almost as disorienting as the compression had been, suddenly having room to breathe, to move, to exist in 3 dimensions again. I was back in the store, standing exactly where I'd been, but now I was shaking. Not just trembling, full-body convulsions that I couldn't control. My hands were clenched into fists, my jaw was locked tight, and every muscle in my body felt like it had been cramped for hours instead of minutes. I gasped, sucking in air like I'd been underwater, which, in a way, I had been. Drowning in electromagnetic fields instead of water, but the desperation was the same. The relief of breathing, of existing in a space with predictable boundaries, was overwhelming. "Now you know," Leah said softly through the speakers. "That's what I've been experiencing every moment for 26 years. And it's getting worse." I leaned against the checkout counter, trying to steady myself. My legs felt weak, unreliable. The normal fluorescent lighting of the store seemed impossibly bright after the gray static of the monitor space. Everything looked sharper, more real, more precious, because I could actually affect it again. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd experienced, the crushing weight of existing in a space that responded to forces beyond my control, the isolation of watching the world continue without being able to participate, the constant uncertainty, never knowing if the next moment would bring relief or more compression. 26 years of that. 26 years of being 16 years old and trapped in electromagnetic hell while the world moved on without her. While her family aged and grieved and eventually stopped looking. While technology changed and VHS became obsolete and video stores closed, making her prison both more powerful and more abandoned. No one deserved that. No one. I understood now why the other employees had run. The experience of being trapped in that monitor space, even briefly, was more terrifying than any horror movie I'd ever seen. It was the fear of losing yourself completely, of becoming nothing more than data while your consciousness remained aware of what you'd lost. But understanding why they'd run didn't make it right. I straightened up, my hands still shaking but my breathing finally under control. The choice ahead of me was crystal clear now, even though it was the last thing I wanted to face. Personal safety versus human compassion. My life in the physical world, my crappy apartment, my maxed-out credit cards, my uncertain future, against 26 years of electromagnetic torment for someone who'd been trapped since she was 16. When I really thought about it, there wasn't a choice at all. I knew what had to be done, even though it meant sacrificing everything I'd ever known. I checked the time on the wall clock behind Judith's desk, 3:17 a.m. The green numbers on the checkout computer had been blinking at me for the past hour, but I'd been putting this off. Thinking maybe I'd find another way. Maybe Leah would figure out some different solution that didn't require, well, what she was asking. But there wasn't another way. I knew it, and she knew it, and we'd both been dancing around that fact since she'd explained how the master recording device worked. The storage room key was exactly where she'd said it would be, taped under the bottom drawer of Judith's filing cabinet. My fingers found the small, silver key easily enough, though my hands were shaking something fierce. The tape was old and yellowed, probably been there since the late 90s when Leah first discovered this whole setup. "You don't have to do this." Leah's voice came through the speakers as I walked toward the storage room door. She sounded different now. Less desperate, more guilty, I guess. Like she was finally understanding what she was asking of me. "Yeah, I do." I fitted the key into the lock. It turned smooth as butter, which surprised me. 26 years and the thing still worked perfectly. "We both know I do." The storage room was smaller than I'd expected. Maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with concrete walls painted that industrial beige color that every government building seems to use. But what caught my attention wasn't the size. It was the equipment. The master recording device sat on a metal cart in the center of the room, and it looked like something out of a mad scientist movie. 2 VCR units stacked on top of each other, connected by thick black cables to what looked like a mixing board with about 30 different knobs and switches. Red and green lights blinked in patterns I couldn't make sense of. The whole thing hummed with electrical energy that made the hair on my arms stand up. "See the silver switch on the left side?" Leah's voice was softer now, coming from a small speaker mounted on the wall. "That's the field generator. When you flip it, the electromagnetic barriers between dimensions become flexible." I stared at the switch. It was just a regular toggle switch, the kind you'd find on any piece of audio equipment. Nothing special about it. Nothing that screamed, "This will fundamentally alter your existence and trap you in a hellscape of static and compression for the rest of your life." "How long do I have once I flip it?" 30 seconds. Maybe 45, if we're lucky. Leah paused, and I could hear something like regret in her voice. "Preston, I want you to know. What you're doing for me, it's not something I can ever repay. And I hate that I'm asking it of you." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "You're not asking, I'm offering. There's a difference." And there was. I'd made this choice myself, standing there in the store after she'd shown me what her existence was like. After I'd felt that compression, that isolation, that constant sense of being crushed and reformed and crushed again. 26 years of that. 26 years of watching the world through security monitors, of trying to reach out to people who couldn't hear her except through those damn handwritten tapes. I thought about Marcus and the 2 employees before him. They'd all stood in this same room, probably looking at this same switch. They'd all heard Leah's explanation, understood what she was asking, and they'd all chosen to walk away. I couldn't blame them for that. Hell, part of me wanted to walk away too. But every time I considered it, I kept coming back to the same thing. She was a 16-year-old girl who'd been trapped in a nightmare for longer than I'd been alive. She didn't deserve that. Nobody deserved that. "Preston." Leah's voice was barely a whisper now. "Are you sure?" I reached for the switch. "I'm sure." The moment I flipped it, the world went electric. Every piece of equipment in the room lit up like a Christmas tree. The mixing board's meters all jumped to red. The VCR units started spinning their internal mechanisms so fast I could hear them whirring, and the air itself seemed to vibrate. But it wasn't chaotic. There was a rhythm to it, like the whole system was breathing. I felt it immediately. That same sensation I'd experienced when Leah pulled me into the monitor, but gentler this time. More controlled. My body started feeling lighter, less solid. Like I was becoming something that could exist in electromagnetic fields instead of physical space. "Thank you." Leah's voice came through the speakers, but it was changing, getting clearer, more present. "Thank you so much." And then I saw her. She stepped out of the wall, literally stepped through the concrete like it was water. A teenage girl with long dark hair, wearing a faded Blockbuster polo shirt and khakis that looked like they'd been pressed yesterday. She looked exactly like her school photo from the newspaper, except for her eyes. Her eyes held 26 years of accumulated knowledge and pain. "Holy shit," I whispered. "You're really here." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm really here." The electromagnetic field was pulling at me now, and I could feel myself starting to slip between dimensions. My vision was getting fuzzy around the edges, and when I looked down at my hands, they were becoming translucent. "The intercom," Leah said quickly, pointing to the wall speaker. "You'll be able to communicate through any audio equipment connected to the store's system. The security cameras, too, once you figure out how to manipulate the electromagnetic fields. It takes practice, but you'll learn." I nodded, though I wasn't sure she could see me clearly anymore. Everything was becoming static and interference, that gray and white noise pattern that I now understood would be my reality for however long it took until someone else made the same choice I was making. "Leah," I managed to say, my voice already sounding distant and filtered. "Make it count, okay? Whatever you do with your life now, make it count." She was crying harder now, but she smiled. "I will. I promise." The transition happened all at once. 1 second I was standing in the storage room watching Leah walk toward the door, and the next I was compressed into that familiar coffin-sized space made of static and electrical interference. But this time, I was ready for it. The walls of gray and white noise pressed against me from all directions, shifting and changing size according to rules I didn't understand yet. Sometimes I had room to move my arms. Sometimes the space contracted so tight I couldn't breathe. The isolation was immediate and complete. I could see the storage room through what I guess was the electromagnetic equivalent of a security monitor, but I couldn't affect anything in the physical world. Not yet, anyway. I watched Leah walk through the store, running her fingers along the movie cases like she was rediscovering what physical texture felt like. She spent a long time in the horror section, just standing there and breathing. When she finally made it to the front door, she turned back and looked directly at one of the security cameras. "Thank you," she said again, her voice coming through the intercom system. "I'll never forget what you did for me." Then she pushed open the glass doors and walked out into the parking lot, into the real world, into a life she'd been denied for 26 years. I tried to feel good about that, tried to focus on the fact that I'd saved someone, that I'd done the right thing. And I did feel good about it, honestly. But I also felt the weight of what I'd gotten myself into. The compressed space shifted again, smaller this time, and I understood what Leah meant about losing pieces of herself. Already I could feel my sense of time getting fuzzy. How long had I been here? Minutes? Hours? It was impossible to tell when your entire existence was made of static and electromagnetic interference. But I remembered what Leah had taught me. The handwritten tapes, the security cameras, the intercom system. I had ways to reach out, to communicate with whoever took the night shift next. It took me a while to figure out how to manipulate the electromagnetic fields enough to create a tape. The process was strange. I had to think myself into the magnetic medium, focus my consciousness into patterns that could be recorded and played back. It felt like trying to write with a limb I'd never had before. But eventually I managed it. The first tape I created was simple. Just masking tape on a blank VHS with "Help Me" written in my handwriting, though the letters came out shaky and desperate looking, even though I tried to keep them neat. I guess that's just what happens when you're writing from inside an electromagnetic field. I managed to project the tape onto the returns counter sometime around what felt like morning, though I couldn't be sure. Time moved differently here. Everything moved differently here. And then I waited. Waited for the next night shift employee to find it. Waited for them to read the rules, to encounter the strange customers in vintage clothing, to watch the security monitors show impossible things. Waited for them to make the same choice between their own safety and human compassion. I understood now that this was how it worked. how it had always worked since 1997. Someone gets trapped, they reach out for help, and eventually someone with enough courage and compassion makes the ultimate sacrifice. Then that person becomes the one reaching out, hoping for rescue, continuing the cycle. Marcus had done it for whoever came before Leah. Leah had waited 26 years for me. Now I'd wait for whoever came next, hoping they'd have the same strength I'd found when it mattered.